So where might you want to take a function as an input? Well, what it lets you do is it lets you write a function that takes a function and calls it. So I'm going to demonstrate this by commenting out we don't need that last function. So I'm going to comment that out for now, but we do need our cleanup string function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a string array, and I'm just going to, I'm going to create a string array, and I'm just going to pass in random things. So we'll say hello, and that one has a lot of spaces at the front. We're gonna put spaces and then we're gonna actually type world and put a lot of spaces at the end. And then we're going to put spaces and then hi and then spaces. So as you can see, we have a string array. Well, let's write a function. We're going to call this function apply to array. What it's going to do is it's going to take an input array and it's going to take an input function. Then what we're going to do is we're going to loop over that array. So we'll say for let counter equal 0. Counter is less than input array dot length, because if we get an array here, then it should have a property called length, which means we can loop over this array. Then I'll put a semicolon, and then we'll say counter plus plus. So thus far, all this function does is it takes in an input array and it takes in an input function. It starts a counter at 0, loops for the length of the array. So in this case, this array has 0, 1, 2 items. So we're going to start at 0 and we're going to go almost up to 3, but not quite including 3, which means we're going to go 0, 1, 2, and we're going to increment by 1 each time. So hopefully you've watched the array videos and you understand how to loop through an array. Okay, what I want to do is I want to go to the string array at the counter position. So meaning the first time this loop goes through, I want to go to this very first position. And what I want to do is I want to set it equal to um, the result of calling input function and passing in as an input. Oh, and I'm sorry. This isn't supposed to be string array. This is supposed to be input array. So I'm going to take whichever array I receive. I'm going to go to the 0 position. If we pass in string array, the 0 position is going to be this hello. And I want to set it equal to calling whichever function we pass in. And as an input to that function, I'm going to take in this exact same thing. So what I'm saying is take this string with a lot of spaces that says hello, pass it in to whatever function I happen to be calling, take the result and store it back where this hello was. And then I put a semicolon, and then I'm going to return the input array. And so I'm going to call this. I'm going to say let results equal apply to array. What am I going to take? What is the input array I want to give it? Well, I want to give it string array. What is the input function I want to give it? Well, I want to give it cleanup string. And then I'm going to console.log the result. Okay, so let's save this and come over to our running code and stop it and reload the page. Okay, if we look at our console, we can see that it says hello, world, and hi. But let's just go over to sources and run our debugger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint on line 33, and I'm going to reload the page. Okay, it says result is going to be equal to whatever the result of calling apply to array is. Apply to array is receiving an input of an array which has strings with different casing and spaces in random places, and then it's also going to receive an input of cleanup function. When we hit next, input array is storing that string array we just passed in. Input function is storing the cleanup function we just passed in, which means if we hit next and we start our counter is at 0. If we go to input array at the 0 position, that's going to be the text with a lot of spaces that says hello and a closing space. And we're going to call input function. What is input function? It's the cleanup string function we wrote earlier. So we'll hit next, and it comes here. What is messy string? Well, it's that spaces with hello inside of it. So we're going to trim it and turn it all to uppercase and return it. And now if we look at our input array, we can see that hello is in all uppercases and all the spaces have been removed. We're going to increment our counter. Now we're going to input array at the 1 position, which means we're taking world with spaces on the end, and we're going to pass it into input function. What is input function? Well, it's still the cleanup string function that we used earlier. So we'll hit next, we'll trim it, convert it to uppercase, and now if we look at our input array, we've cleaned up the first 2 strings, and we run it and clean up the next string, return our array, and it returns to result, and now result is storing hello, world, and hi, all in uppercase with no spaces. So that's cool and all. We probably didn't need to write a function passed into a function for that. But why did we do that? Well, let's say I write another function, and I call this function um, round. And we take in a number, and we return math.round. And it says, what value do you want to round? The number, and it rounds it to the nearest integer. So what this does is it takes in the number and rounds it to the nearest integer. Well, now if we have another array, we'll call it num array, and we'll set it equal to a bunch of numbers. So 3.5, 2.3, 5.5. The great thing about our apply to array function is it doesn't care what array we give it or what function we give it. So that means we can reuse our apply to array function. And we can say, let result2 equal apply to array. We can take in the number array. We can take in the round function. And now, if we save it, we can come over to here. And if we come to our console, oh, I forgot to log the results. Console.log result2. And we reload the page. We come to the console. We get hello, world, and hi. That string was clean. All of those strings were cleaned up. And then we get 4, 2, 5, and 5. Well, how did that happen? Well, we already wrote an apply to array function, and it can take in an array. So the first time it took in this string array, and what function did it apply to every item in the array? It applied cleanup string. Well, the next time we called it and we passed in this number array. And what function did we apply to it? The round function. So why is this nice? Well, it allows us to write a function that takes other functions and applies it to an array. There wasn't a function previously called apply to array, but we were able to create one, and we made it flexible enough that it can take in any function that you want and it can apply it to an array. And the nice thing about this is it can take in built-in functions. So we could say, let result3 equal apply to array, and we could take the number array as an input, and we could apply math.round. And instead of calling this round function, we could just directly pass in the math.round function, and it'll apply it to our array. So the nice thing about being able to take a function as an input is that you can call it, and you don't need to care which function it is. We didn't care which function they passed us. We just called it on the array and applied the result to the array.